Back in the year 1985, Sports Illustrated published an article saying that they found this special young man named Sid Finch. See, this special young man, even though he never played a single game of baseball in his life, he could throw a baseball 168 miles an hour. This this new prospect exploded in the baseball world and even in the sports world. And because this special young prodigy could change baseball forever. He even signed a contract with the New York Mets, a professional baseball team. And they even gave him a jersey, the signed contract, took pictures with their pitching coach. Everything was everything was getting geared up for an amazing season for the New York Mets. People were zoomed in to see this guy actually pitch. They seen pictures, they saw the signing day, the jerseys and everything, but they were looking forward to the day they actually get to see this 168-mile-an-hour fastball. But it turned out to be one massive April Fool's prank. The guy that supposedly could throw this 168-mile-an-hour fastball, well, he was just a friend of the guy who wrote the article for Sports Illustrated and agreed to just have the pictures taken of him as he's just throwing a ball random places and everything. And the Mets caught wind of this prank, and they're like, "Hey, we'll play along with this to go along with this prank." And so that's where they came up with the contract, the jerseys, the pictures, everything, the press releases, and everything. But with this particular prank, it was surprising to see that people truly believed that there was a guy out there that could throw 168 miles an hour. And this was just a harmless prank. This was just a simple April Fool's joke. We gotcha. No one got hurt. It was just a simple prank. But today we're going to be looking at how one man had fooled the king Xerxes into making a new law that it wasn't a harmless prank. In fact, it was something that was harmful to a big group of people. So today we're continuing our series in the book of Esther with the theme, the purpose in my position. So just a little refresher on what we looked at last week when we first started this unique book. So King Xerxes, he had a big banquet, extravagant banquet. He got really drunk, and then he wanted his queen to then parade around and show off her body while wearing her crown, but she refused to do so. So the king got upset and then kicked her out. And king realized what he did was wrong and it was bad. And so he got wisdom from his counselors to then have a massive beauty contest in a way. And so he got he had a bunch of women from all over the province of Persia to come back to Susa, the capital. That's where Esther is taking place, and they were then to get a year's worth of beauty treatments before they go before the king. And Esther was then selected to be a part of these beauty treatments, and the king Xerxes he found her to be the most beautiful um, and decided to make her the new queen. And with Esther, with her being Jewish, she didn't exactly say that she was Jewish. She kept it hidden because her cousin Mordecai told her to not say anything about her being Jewish. To keep that hidden. Don't tell anyone about her being Jewish. And then there was even an assassination attempt on the king, but Mordecai overheard this plot being made, and he then was able to inform Esther, who then in turn told the king, and it was able to be stopped. And so no one was hurt in that process. So now we're in chapter 3. And so between chapters 2 and 3, these events don't happen right away. See, with this book, this is over the course of several years. And so, as I mentioned, Esther had to go about a year's worth of beauty treatments before she could go be with the king. And so there's a lot of time frame in that. But then with chapter 3, we're about 4 years later. So about 4 years later, we get to chapter 3, and we get to our first point. We have a new man in charge. A new man in charge. This is verses 1 through 6 in chapter 3, and I'm going to read this for us. And so, starting in verse 1 of chapter 3, it says, "After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles." So, just a little understanding of who this guy is, this new man in charge, Haman. He is an Agagite. He is given this royal status. He is given the seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. So he's pretty much the second in command of all of Persia. The only person who is higher than Haman is the king himself. Excuse me. So Haman, he's an Agagite. Who are the Agagites? They're most likely the descendants of King Agag of the Amalekites. So a little understanding of who the Amalekites are. See, this is not the first time we see a reference to, with the Agagites and Amalekites. We actually see in Exodus chapter 17 the Amalekites. This is where we see the Amalekites. So with Exodus 17, we see the Hebrews. They've just came out of Egypt. So like Moses, he brought them out of slavery, and they've already crossed the Red Sea. If you remember that big event, the parting of the Red Sea, the Hebrews, they walked on dry land, and then the Egyptians, they tried to follow them, but then the waters were no longer parted, and they drowned all the Egyptians. And so with the Hebrews, they're now leaving that event. All of a sudden, the Amalekites attacked the Hebrews. They attacked them from behind. They ambushed them, but the Amalekites did not focus on mainly the military of the Hebrews or the strong men. They focused on the slow and the old people, the old Hebrews. And so this made God very upset, very angry that the Amalekites did this. But then we don't see them later on until 1 Samuel chapter 15, where God told King Saul, the first king of Israel, to go and wipe out the Amalekites, destroy everything and everyone. But the problem is that King Saul, he disobeyed God. He did not kill all of the Amalekites. In fact, he kept their king Agag alive. And so that's just at least a little brief understanding of what's going on here. So we have King Agag, even though King Saul was supposed to kill King Agag lived. He continued on to live. And so then we have his descendants. Now, Haman is now alive. He's a descendant, and he is now put second in command in Persia. And so then coming back to Esther, so again, that's at least understanding of who Haman is, a little bit of his history. So in verse 2, all the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Verse 3, then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, why do you disobey the king's command? Verse 4, day after day, they spoke to him and refused to comply. Therefore, they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. So, with Haman, with him being second in command, there's a specialty ranking. There's some honor to be given to him. But one of the things that Haman wanted was to make sure that everyone bowed to him, that everyone understood that he was in charge, that he had to be bowed down to. But the thing is, for Haman, he wasn't exactly looking for just respect, that you respected him. He wanted worship. He wanted people to glorify him. And so people were kneeling down and giving him what he wanted, but Mordecai refused. So Mordecai, if you remember, he's the cousin of Esther, the girl who became queen. See, Mordecai understood that with Haman, he's an Agagite. He understands the history. He understands the division between the two people groups. But he also knew that Haman wanted to be worshipped. Haman, he was the guy who most likely he just schemed his way into the position that he's in now. Maybe he tried to butter up the king a little bit. Maybe he he just did something to earn that position. Most likely it wasn't done in an honorable way. But Mordecai, he refused to bow down because it's not just referring to the history between the Agadites and the Jews, but it's also that he was Jewish. He was not going to bow down to anyone but God. Now, with today's culture, we understand that there are cultures where they bow down to one another, but it's not about respect. It's not about worship. It's about just simple respect. It's for us in the United States, like we would give one a handshake, like that's a form of respect. But in other cultures, it would just be you give a small bow to one another, and that's just simple respect. It's not worship. Now, maybe the people that were bowing down to Haman were just saying, "Okay, you want to bow down? Okay, that's fine." And they thought, "Oh, we're just giving him respect for the position." But Mordecai understood Haman doesn't want respect; he wants to be worshipped. Let's see, with Haman, he wasn't exactly happy that Mordecai didn't bow down. And we see this starting in verse 5. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet, having learned that who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews, throughout the whole land of Xerxes. So, so Haman finds out Mordecai is Jewish. Now, for Haman, he's like, well, I'll just kill Mordecai, and this can be a simple way that I can get the message across that you have to bow. You have to bow down to me. That's Haman's thought process. He could use Mordecai as an example, but he didn't want to just kill Mordecai. Haman wanted to completely get rid of the Jews, to annihilate them. So then he decided to start making a plan on killing them, on getting rid of the Jews once and for all. And so the only way to do this is to make the Jews sound like they're an enemy, that they're the problem, that they have to be dealt with. And in starting in verse 7, we see Haman having this plot. He goes to before the king, and he tells him there's a new enemy in the land. And that's our second point, the new enemy in the land. This is verses 7 through 11. So starting in verse 7, we see our second point, new enemy in the land. So starting in verse 7, in the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the month of Nisan, they cast the perm, that is the lot, in the presence of Haman to select a day and month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. So a little understanding here. So casting lots. This is kind of like rolling dice. And this would be people asking the stars, asking their gods, their wisdom, their understanding, seeking their knowledge, their like seeking what they should do. Which it's kind of interesting that Haman was looking to the stars, to the gods for this special day to annihilate the Jews when he could have just been looking at a calendar. And so with the lots, they fell on the 12th month of Adar. And we see later on in this passage that the day that this would then happen is the 13th of Adar. And so, little understanding here of where these months align. So they're currently in the month of Nisan, and we see that in verse 7. It's the first month, the month of Nisan. And so the month of Nisan for us, this is around April, May, somewhere in there. So like around springtime. But the month of Adar, that's around February, March. So this time frame is about a year later. So the day that Haman was given by his gods was going to be about another year. And we'll talk about more of that later on, about that particular day. But continuing on for now, and so Haman got the day. He got this special time frame. In verse 8, then Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed and scattered among the peoples of all the provinces of your kingdom, whose customs are different from those of all other people, and who do not obey the king's laws. It is not the king's best interest to tolerate them. Verse 9, if it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury for the men who carry out this business. So we see King Haman, he takes that special day, the 13th of Adar, and then he goes before the king, and tells the king, hey, there's this group of people. They're not really good. They're not a great group. They disobey you and their customs. They're not of our kingdom. We need to get rid of them. It would be the best interest of the king to just wipe out this enemy of yours. Now, with this, we see that Haman doesn't actually give a description of who the people are, or he at least doesn't give the name of the people. See, like you might be watching the news or something where you see the reporter would say like, "Oh, these two nations are enemies of each other," and actually give the enemies. And I know definitely after last night, the Bears and Packers are probably even more bigger enemies between each other, which more just for me, I mean, not great enemies with the Bears and Packers. I still love Packers fans, obviously. Tom, we're still good friends, right? I hope even after last night, but that's just the point. There's a description, there's the designation of the group of people where there's that conflict. But Haman doesn't give that. He just says there's a group of people that we need to destroy. Now with King Xerxes, we don't overly see like him questioning this particular accusation. Maybe this is the king. Maybe the king was just saying like, "Okay, I trust you. I believe you," or maybe the king did ask, "Well, who are these people? Like who is this group of people?" And then Haman might have replied, "Don't worry about that. It's okay. You stay there. You be the king. I can take care of this. In fact, I will take care of this, uh, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the treasury. If I can do this for you, I will pay you to do this." That's how much Haman wanted to get rid of the Jews. He was willing to pay 10,000 talents of silver to take care of it, to get rid of the Jews. Which then we see in verse 10. So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, "and do with the people as you please." And so we see that the king, he takes off his signet ring and gives it to Haman. The king is taking off his specialty ring. So this ring that the king is giving, this is the ring that he would use to make a law permanent. This is kind of like the king's signature. So like if like the king had a document or something, he would then take the ring, maybe take some wax, put that on the paper, and then he would take the ring and then he would stamp it. There would be like a special symbol on that ring. And he gave that to Haman. Excuse me. And what's special about this ring is that whenever a law is made, it cannot be changed, which kind of goes back to what we saw with King Xerxes and his former queen Vashti, where he decided to kick her out, and most likely he then would have used that ring to seal the deal, and now he can't change it. And so now he's giving that same power to Haman. And he's even saying, keep the money. Like the king saying, keep your money. The king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please. This is the king is saying, hey, I'm going to give you the people that you need. I'm going to give you all the resources you need. Just do what you need to do to get rid of these people, to annihilate them. Which for Haman he takes that ring and he seals the deal. He makes that new law. Okay, that's our third and final point, where the new law is sealed. It's given that special ring where no one can do anything about it. No one can change this law. So starting in verse 12, again, our third point is the new law sealed. So starting in verse 12, then on the 13th day, the first month, royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province, in the language of each people, in all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Verse 13, dispatches were sent by carriers to all the king's provinces with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and little children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as a law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality so they would be ready for that day. So we see Haman, he is officially made this new law. The law is set and no one can change it. That on the 13th day of Adar, the Jews will be completely destroyed. Now, friends, do we remember who is a particular Jew that lives in the palace? Esther, the queen. And we're going to see more about her and her response to all this with the next couple of weeks. But we see with Haman, he not only wants to destroy the Jews, not just the men, the military, he's wanting to annihilate all of the Jews, the young, the old, men, women, children, every single one of them, to finally get his revenge, to destroy the Jews once and for all. But more than just killing them, he's saying to plunder all their goods. So for everyone who kills the Jews to then just take all their possessions as for themselves. But then to also have every language, all the different languages that were in the province, to know about this new edict, that everyone is to be ready on this special day, the 13th month of Adar, which, remember, there's about another year until that day comes up. So we're in the month of Nisan. It's going to be about another year until the 13th day of Adar. But then we see in verse 15 of the response to all that is going on, we see, so again, in verse 15, the last verse of the chapter, spurred by the king's command, and carriers went out, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. So we see the king and Haman, they're just having a drink. They're just, this is just a normal day. We're doing business. Now, granted, the king doesn't exactly know what Haman is trying to really do. But for Haman, he's just sitting back, having his little drink, hanging out with the king, just like any other day. But then at the very last half sentence, it says, but the city of Susa was bewildered. And They're the people of this capital. They're thinking, we've never seen the king ever give out this type of order, this type of edict before. What's going on? And for them, they're just seeing the king and Haman. They're just like, yep, business as usual. Why is everyone acting so weird? Why are you so confused? They weren't used to the king being so bloodthirsty like this, just to kill just a random group of people and just to make this edict. It can be confusing when you see something random like this and not just trying to understand what's going on, what's really going on. What's the whole point of all of this happening? Even us as followers of Christ, where we might see this thing happen, maybe not necessarily a leader gives the order to then just kill a random group of people just because, but just trying to understand what's going on. We don't understand. And those questions are answered later on in this book. But and I encourage you to obviously come back with us for the next several weeks as we continue on in this account. But for today, as we focus more on Esther 3, there's three applications to take away for us today. Our first application point is being mindful of those desiring earthly power over heavenly power. See, for Haman, he was the guy who wanted power. He wanted glory, fame, and money. He wanted to be worshipped. But for Jesus, he wants us to simply desire him, to desire him alone. There are people in this world that desire power, money, fame. There's even fellow Amazon drivers where all they want is they just want more money. They want the power to do what they want. But when it comes to Jesus Christ, he just wants us to follow him, to follow his power, his supreme heavenly power. You just need to be mindful of those desiring that earthly power over the heavenly power. Second thing is to research information when people make accusations about someone or something. See, I remember back in the early 2000s, back when the internet was really um, was really popular for everyone, where people on the internet were making accusations about various things, like the aliens made the pyramids in Egypt. And it's like, okay, I mean, with that, we know it was actually Hebrew slaves that made the pyramids in Egypt, but people actually would put that on the internet, and then there are others who believed it, and then they just took it as is. They're like, okay, it's like, no, friends, do some research before you fully believe in something. Because now, granted, there are people who would gossip. They just decide to just make up stories or just want to tell people about various things. But yes, people just want to gossip. Now, there's also people, maybe they have wrong information. They don't exactly have the complete picture. They think they might be telling the truth, but they just don't have all the information. But it's smart to just look up that information to actually know, is this true? Is it trustworthy? Is the person actually trying to give me their best answer? Friends, that even comes to scripture. We are to research this book, these words that we're given. We're not just meant to just read and be like, okay, I believe it. We're meant to dig deep into these words, into scriptures. Now, I'm not saying that these words are gossiping or lying, but it's to understand them more, to dig deep into the roots of scripture. But then finally, we need to be ready to defend the Lord our God. We need to be ready to defend the Lord our God. Mordecai knew Haman wanted to be worshipped, but he chose to not bow down to Haman. Mordecai says, no, I'm a Jew. I don't bow down to anyone except my God. And for Mordecai, this would have been extremely tough for him, as he was the only one who did not bow. He refused to bow down, and he was alone. And friends, I felt a very similar situation last year. Last year, I was a groomsman for one of my friends at his wedding. I was excited for him. I met his fiance, which they're married now, and they're a fantastic couple. They even got a new dog now. But for that wedding, one of the things that we were instructed to do as we came down the aisle is to then bow. And we were to bow down. And for me, I didn't hear anyone say who we're bowing to. And I felt awkward. I'm like, okay, well, am I just giving a little nod to my bro, to my friend, as like that form of little respect? If that's fine, that's like okay, as long as I'm not worshiping anything or anyone, that's fine. But I just said, you know what, I'm not going to bow until that question is answered. And so then my friends, my friends told me, Tim, you have to bow. You have to bow down. I then asked them the question, well, who am I bowing to? And they pointed to a statue. I looked at the statue, and within a second, I told them, guys, I don't bow down to idols. I only bow down to Jesus. And it was tough. I felt my heart pounding. It wasn't beating fast, it was pounding out of my chest. I thought my heart was about to rip out of my chest. That's how hard it was pounding. And yeah, I felt alone because I was the only one who did not bow. But I knew I could not betray Jesus. I need to put Jesus first. So, friends, as we go about 2026, may we be prepared to defend our faith. Let us pray.